Hello, everybody. Welcome to Outcomes of Sun podcast radio, where you can find us so many amazing places. Anyway, it's great to be here. We have a great show today, but we also have a great conversation because we always do. So, you know, jump right in there, Melissa, and get us started.
Something that's shifting and transitioning in healthcare is telehealth, where a lot of doctors, it really began before COVID, but really came to light heavily during COVID, where people couldn't get out of their homes or go in to see the doctor that you would meet with your doctor on. What I've been reading a lot recently, thanks to my mother, who's my research assistant here. She's been sending me articles about mental health was a really big thing during COVID. But then when people would be moved, say I met with my therapist for mental health in the state of Colorado, for example. If I were to move then to Arkansas, it would not transfer on state lines. So one of the big things that's happening, not on a federal level, but they're trying to find reciprocity state to state, is depression wherever you are. And if you've cultivated a relationship with your therapist, and for example, if it's the state of Colorado, then just because you've left the state doesn't mean that you should have to reinvent a relationship with someone elsewhere. But they're finding that it doesn't cross state lines. So this has been a state by state attempt at reciprocity. We'll acknowledge your doctors by telehealth if you'll acknowledge ours. And it's fascinating to me. It really is an easy way to extend mental health care, but it's a little bit of a red tape issue. So I would like to encourage our listeners that if they are aware, if their representatives in their state or their insurance companies like an Optum out of Idaho, these kind of companies that do this work are trying really hard to extend that mental health care state to state, it's worth calling up and fighting for.
Yeah, it's worth fighting for, and it's worth trying to erase those boundaries, because there really shouldn't be boundaries to mental health care. And especially when it comes to mental health, when you have somebody that you trust, that you feel safe with, to have to shift that and reinvent that relationship is very, very difficult on somebody that's taken the time to express them. That's hard, man.
And the thing is about it, it's when I was involved in a lot of work in DC, one of the issues that I was helping with others fight for was reciprocity with licensed stylists and people in the beauty industry, cosmetology licensed people. So if I got my license in the state of Georgia and I was moving to Connecticut with my family, I may have to go back to beauty school. So all of my hours would just have been dissipated once I left my home state and moved. And so we were trying to fight and really going state by state, trying to fight for reciprocity. And this is the same thing in that it's the licensing. So these therapists who are licensed, they're licensed. If you're licensed in the state of Colorado, you cannot necessarily protect somebody who's in the state of Arkansas. The author of this latest article I read said something I thought was interesting. She said, each state needs to take push for change. One way is by encouraging our lawmakers to pass legislation automatically recognizing therapy credentials issued by other states. That's a reciprocity. But another way is to press for change by petitioning the Board of Behavioral Sciences to modify current rules requiring an in-state license. Because under California law, anyone can file an administrative petition requesting an amendment of regulations. And if we can get involved, we need to get involved. If I knew that my daughter or son needed mental health care and had a therapist, but were going out of state for their school, their university, or even their job, then it would be incumbent upon me, along with my child, if they were not old enough, to stand up and fight and try to let people know that this matters to us. So if they can recognize the licensing state to state, that will change a lot of it. But I never even really thought about that. I just assumed your therapist is your therapist, no matter where you are.
Wow.
Naively.
I naively thought that too. I really thought that any kind of mental health, but of course, mental health is so behind that it's
Yes.
not a surprise now that you mention it, that it's way behind. But good to know, because if speaking up, if saying something to your congressman, or getting in touch with behavioral sciences part of your government will make a difference, and do it.
Do it.
Oh my
Speak up.
gosh.
Yep.
And not just for mental health, but for your physical
Yes.
well-being. Because I have a friend who is she's a practitioner in Idaho, right? And we were talking about having her come to Los Angeles and doing some stuff, whatever it is. But she was like, oh, well, we've got to look into that. We've got to look into
Yep.
that, because I don't know if I can, right? So,
Right.
and it is kind of shocking that we live in the same country, but boy, state to state, it
State to
doesn't,
state.
there is not reciprocity.
Absolutely. And in some part for good reason, because there's some states are what others known as too lax. I know when in the beauty industry, not to draw a complete parallel here, but in the beauty industry, I know that like some states don't require that you have a cosmetology license to do nails. Like you can just walk in and learn from your sister, your auntie, or a friend, or just go in, because and if you show initiative, you can get hired to start doing nails. But other states are very strict about it because they know that you get staph infection, so forth. So with it, that's a minor example, but with reason we have state by state. However, and I know we don't like to get the federal mayonnaise spread involved in everything we're doing, but it seems as though if a practitioner said, I'd like to be considered under federal licensing so that I can take care of my clients in Alaska to Florida, from California to New York, and everyone in between, then that would be a different maybe test, a different something, right? It seems so, because I know attorneys do that. And an attorney can practice in California and in Texas, as long as he has passed the bar for both places.
And again, when we, Bobby and I had a copyright situation years ago, and where the copyright was in Georgia, actually, and we had to get if we were going to fight it, which we didn't, but we would have had to go to Georgia and get a Georgia appointed lawyer. So
well, you don't want to go to Georgia, because only the devil goes down to Georgia. The devil came down to Georgia. That's a song, right? I think so. I think it's a Charlie Daniels song. We're going to let that one pass. It's a song. I've heard it. The devil came down to Georgia. Yeah, something like that.
It was Statesboro, Georgia.
Listen, you don't want to mess with Georgians.
Spoke to the judge. He was appointed by Jimmy Carter. He was in Bible study class. He couldn't come to the phone. We were being sued. Have a nice day.
That was Bobby Williams, my friends. That's who he is.
We got a cool person. We got a really good person coming up.
Oh my gosh, we really do. This guy, I've been longing to have a conversation with him for a long time, and we have to tell the story before he comes on, of how you got a text about we should speak to our next guest, Kevin Hines, and I then text you an hour later that, because I had just seen on my Instagram feed Kevin Hines on Zach Williams' page, and I thought, oh my God, he's so amazing. And I said that to you, and you were like, what is going on?
Yeah, what? The ethers were shoving this man our way.
I love it. I love it. It's so good. Well, everybody, stay
we are delightful dames. We are dames. Dame Mariel and Dame Melissa.
Oh my God. Does that mean we're old? No.
Duchess Mariel and Duchess Melissa.
Anyway, we've got a great guest. Stay where you are. You're listening to Out Comes the Sun radio podcast with my wonderful co-host, Melissa Yamaguchi. And I forgot to say that at the beginning of the show. And I'm Mariel Hemingway. So come back, because we got a great guest.
As a mental health advocate and author, I love books. Books have the capacity to inspire, educate, transform, and ultimately help readers all over the world. So if you want to publish your book, or if you need help writing your story, I highly recommend Mindstir Media, rated the #1 best book publisher around the country. Mindstir Media can help you no matter where you are in the book writing or publishing process. Go to mindstirmedia.com to learn more and schedule a consultation.
Welcome back, everybody. We have such an incredible guest today. I'm so excited. Kevin Hines is a storyteller. He is a best-selling author. He's a global public speaker and an award-winning documentary filmmaker. In the year 2000, Kevin attempted to take his life by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. Many factors contributed to his miraculous survival, including a sea lion, which kept him afloat until the Coast Guard arrived. I just get chills. Kevin now travels the world sharing his story of hope, healing, and recovery while teaching people of all ages the art of wellness and the ability to survive pain with true resilience. His motto is, "Be here tomorrow," and every day after that. And that's hashtag "Be Here Tomorrow." I love that. In 2016, Kevin won the Clifford W. Beers Award for his efforts to improve the lives of and attitudes toward people with mental illnesses. Kevin sat on the boards of the International Bipolar Foundation, IBPF, and the Bridge Roll Foundation, BRF, and the Mental Health Association of San Francisco, MHASF, and the Survivors Committee of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. In 2013, Kevin released his best-selling memoir titled Cracked, Not Broken: Surviving and Thriving After a Suicide Attempt. And he has recently produced an incredible documentary entitled Suicide: The Ripple Effect. Well, Kevin, first of all, thank you for all that you do. You just, like I've seen you over the years on social media. I know a lot of people that know you, and there's been this kind of cross-pollination with our lives and stories. And I don't have your story, but your story has been so impactful. And what I love about what you share with people is the importance of telling your story. And that's like Melissa and I talk about that all the time, that the first step in our road to recovery is tell your story. Because my belief is, and maybe you can expand on this, my belief is that when you finally tell your story to a health practitioner, a doctor, a friend, a spouse, whomever, that once you start telling the story, then it becomes a story and it doesn't define you. What do you think about that?
I think there's great truth to that, Mariel. I think that when you release your pain, when you speak your pain, when you talk about it to someone willing to listen, willing to empathize, willing to understand, to listen to understand, not necessarily to respond,
Right.
There is a visceral reaction to what happens there. Stories are 22 times more memorable than statistics or facts, and they help people get their narrative inside out. And when they do that, I always say a pain shared is a pain halved. And I think that's very true. And I think that when you can find one person to share your pain with, so you don't have to live it alone, you can survive it.
100%. It's so great. And you really, your whole social media platform is really about just incorporating this, tell your story, get your message out there. You're never alone, right? You're inviting people to not only tell their story, but you're inviting them to look inward, but also share that story. And like you said, it kind of cuts that pain in half. And I think it is so true. What are how did you get to this place where you're able to do what you're doing and share and share very specific things? I don't know, study. I don't know. I don't know what.
I never took any public speaking courses. I'll kind of tell you the impetus to how I began to tell my story, because I think it's an important story to tell. I was in my first psych ward stay after my attempt. I had gone a month and a half of going from after my surgery to replace my shattered vertebrae with titanium from the jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. I had gone from the surgery to a wheelchair to a back brace and a walker, and then a back brace and a cane, and then right into my first psychiatric unit, because you can't just go home after that. So I go to the psychiatric unit, and I'm there in that psych ward for about a month. And it was in that psych ward that a Franciscan friar named Brother George Cherry, I'll never forget, he had the black robe and the white robe and the brown sandals and the stark white hair like St. Francis with no birds. And he comes into my psych ward room, and this is a guy who had been the chaplain of the hospital at St. Mary's for nearly 30 years. And for 30 years, he would always read the chart to know why the person was in the room. Why was that patient in that hospital? But for the first time in 30 years, he said, you know what, I'm just going to walk right in. He felt compelled not to read the chart. He just walks right into my room. And here I am for the first time, for the first day, putting my back brace on myself, because I was teaching myself how to do it, and I had to learn somehow, some way. So I'm putting the back brace on myself, which is very difficult, and there's an excruciating physical pain. And I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, and my cane is to my right. And Brother George Cherry walks in, he goes, "Hey kid, what are you in for?" And I said, "Brother, I jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge." And he goes, "Yeah, and I'm the Pope." He thought I was delusional because I was in a psych. No, brother, that's what happened. That's why the back brace, that's why the cane, that's why I'm here. I did that. He goes, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. Oh, please forgive me." So, you know what, kid? Let's pray. And so he comes in, he sits next to me, and we said, "Our Father," and a Hail Mary. And he goes, "Kid, when you get better, you ought to talk about this." And I looked at him and I said, "About what? To who?" And he said, "You'll see." Every day, Brother George Cherry would come into my room. Every day he would pray with me. Every day at the end of his prayer, he would say, "Kid, when you get better, you ought to talk about this." And every day I would ignore him. The final day of my stay, my father's kind of helping me hobble out of the doorway. And Brother George Cherry kind of comes out and he goes, "Hey, Kevin, I expect you'll talk about this." And I remember looking at him and going like, "See ya." Like, that's not gonna happen. That's what you're talking about. And so I end up with my dad going to church. I think it was like a week later. And we go to the church I grew up my whole life in, the grade school I attended, St. Cecilia's, and the church next door. And we go there, and the priest's service was talking right to me. Like, I thought my dad had gone up to him and been like, "This is what you need to say to my son," which is entirely possible. He was on their board. But he comes out of the service at the end and he goes, "Kevin, so glad you made it out today. So glad you're healing up." I was still wearing my back brace, walking with my cane. My dad was helping me around. And he goes, "Kevin, how would you like to come and talk to our 7th and 8th grade classes about your experience this Good Friday?" I said, "Oh, Father, I don't have a speech and I wouldn't know what to say." And my dad shoved me forward and goes, "He'll do it." I was like, "What are you doing, Dad?" He goes, "You'll do it. We need closure." And Pat Hines is 6'1" and I'm not. So there it is. And so I said, "Father, I'll see you on Good Friday." And so Good Friday rolls around, and it's not 7 months after my attempt. And I'm wearing my back brace, walking with my cane, and I walk into the rectory at St. Cecilia's grade school. And I'm looking at these 127th and 8th grade kids sitting in their Catholic uniform I used to wear, cross-legged on the floor, eagerly waiting my speech that I wrote until 3 a.m. that morning, not mentally healthy. It was a 17-page speech that took me 45 minutes to read aloud. And I practiced it that morning in my room. But here in front of these 120 kids, it was different. It was like, I was raw. It was emotional. I started crying during the entire speech. I'm dropping page by page to the floor while holding onto the table behind me and my cane. And I've got my back brace around my shirt, and I'm a mess, and I'm shaking and crying the whole way through, thinking to myself, what a waste of time. Who is this helping? And then 8 hands go up at the end. I was like, did I make an impact? And I called the kid in the back, and he says the most inappropriate question you could ask at a Catholic school. And the nun yells out, don't answer that. And I was like, I wasn't going to. And then 7 more intuitive, empowering, important, moving questions. And I was like, oh, I did make an impact. Wow, okay. And I answer them to the best of my ability, and then I go home. And I think to myself, well, that was it. I'm done with that. That's never going to happen again. And then 2 weeks later, Father Michael Harriman calls me to the rectory and says, Kevin, I have something for you. Could you come pick it up? And my dad was at work. So I huck up this 2-mile hill with a back brace and a cane in the beating sun in San Francisco, sweating through my back brace. I get to Father Harriman's office, and I sit down, I take my inhaler, and he hands me a manila envelope, and I open it. And it was a pencil-colored drawing of the Sacred Heart of Jesus that one of the kids done. It was beautiful. Open that, and there's 120 letters from 120 kids.
Wow.
And they were mandated to write the letters. A bunch of 7th and 8th grade kids didn't go, let's all write to the suicidal guys simultaneously. But nonetheless, they were not given parameters on what they could write. They were told to write to their heart's content, and they were minors under the age of 18. This is important for counselors of grade school students and younger high school students. They were told to write to their heart's content. Several of them wrote of their active suicidal crisis. The letters were screened by the teachers and the parents. The kids were given the mental health care and help they needed. They're alive today. 2 of them are therapists.
That's amazing. I'm crying.
Wow.
So
impressive.
when my dad read those letters, he read them in one sitting, in like less than an hour. He's a quick reader. And he read them, and he called me into his office, and he goes, Kevin, we have to do this however, wherever, and whenever possible, and we cannot stop. And we never stopped.
That's amazing. That story is so damn.
It went from 1 speech a year to 300 dates a year all around the world.
You made the attempt on your life, Kevin, by jumping at 19. Is that right? Did I read that correctly?
That's correct.
So you were an extremely young man. I mean, just fresh out of high school. And my question for you is, so you speaking to 7th and 8th graders was good. It's incredibly impactful because that's a rough time. We know in school that's a rough time. That's when social media seems to affect them more than any other age, and it continues on. Yeah. In your opinion, what role do you think the schools have in addressing mental wellness and suicide ideation? And also the second half of my question is, at what age do you think would be impactful for them to start the conversations?
I'll answer the second question first. We need to have mental health literacy from K through 12.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Period. I used to say 4th grade, but that's too old. K through 12 needs mental health literacy at the level at which the kids can comprehend it.
Sure.
And people, and I'm a part of developing that right now with a certain program. So there are different organizations doing things like that, but we really need to create it at the comprehension level of that grade from K through 12. Because, I mean, they say that a 4-year-old can't conceptualize their own death. But they found situations where children that young have self-harmed. So they know what pain is, and they do experience it, and they have acted upon it.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be aware of that. We need to not be afraid of it. One of the biggest roadblocks I find myself running into is that I've been doing this for 23 years, longer than a lot of people. And one of the biggest missteps people make is parents will opt their kids out of the presentation, thinking that it's just a painful situation that they're going to put their kids in, and it's scary, and you shouldn't talk about it. And if you talk about suicide, they'll just go do it. It's all nonsense. You tell the
Yeah.
truth about suicide in a non-sensationalistic way with the power of education and entertainment and humor,
Yeah.
and you can change a life forever. And so I think that helping parents understand not to be afraid of the topic, but to approach the topic in that manner will save lives. The fear is justified. It's understood, but we need to shift away from it so we can get the kids the education they so desire and so deserve so they can stay here.
Well, certainly we start talking to them about saying no to drugs and understanding the ramifications of drugs as early as kindergarten. They start getting information in the schools about how this is bad. Don't touch these, prescriptions. They start giving that information. So I'm right. I'm in agreement with you that's a good age to start. I read a book about a friend of mine. He wrote a book about his life, and his opening line on chapter 1 was, by the age of 6, I had already planned out my death because it seemed like it would be so much sweeter than the life I was experiencing. And he was 6. So I'm happy to hear you say that five is a,
Yeah, it's so important. And kids are impacted by everything that's going around them. So maybe they can't conceptualize death, but like you said, they can feel pain.
Yeah.
And who knows the trauma, abuse, or whatever that they might be experiencing or witnessing. It's a lot, and making that taboo and pretending that like that doesn't exist. That's never been. I mean, my poor kids. I talked about it so much. They're like, "All right, mom."
You can't solve a problem by ignoring it. No one has ever been able to solve a crisis by ignoring it. No one.
Or that whole thing of like pushing it away, and eventually you're just gonna get tired. It's gonna, like flatten you. Yeah.
We need to have the conversation of suicide prevention and brain and mental health at the breakfast, lunch, and dinner table in every household, period, the end done.
Absolutely. What would you say are the lifestyle kind of things that you focus on? I'm just curious what your kind of, see that.
So let's just talk about the 3 E's. I have a 10-step program I wrote years ago called The Art of Wellness. And I wrote it with one of the top suicidologists in the field at the time. He gave me his clinical perspective, but I really wrote the program. And I wrote it based upon the experience I had in my 3rd psych ward stay and what I needed to do to get better. It was the first time in my journey, 3rd psych ward stay, involuntary. And it was the first time I realized that I had the power to shift my perspective and my perception so I could survive my pain. And it was the first time that I decided to be honest about what I was going through with my therapist, who knew honesty in therapy was a good idea, right? So the 3 E's are education, reading every possible thing I can about my diagnosed bipolar depression so I can defeat it. Exercise, since I've been given the gift of being physically capable, so many people don't have that. Since I've been given the gift of being physically capable, especially after what I did to myself and nearly losing that, I have to get to the ground and get to work on a regular basis, working out my body and eating healthily. Now, that's different for different people. My two tenets for eating healthily: anti-inflammatory foods versus inflammatory foods.
Yes.
You can talk anything you want about all the diets in the world, but the one thing that is constant about food is there are anti-inflammatory versus inflammatory foods. If you can have an 80-20 rule of eating mostly anti-inflammatory meals most days, you can better your brain and way better your mental, brain, mind, behavioral, physical health, and well-being. And so those are the things I look to, plus the other 7 tools I utilize. And for any of your audience who wants to know all 10, just youtube.com/Kevin Hines. The video is called The Art of Wellness 2.0. Thousands of people use it around the world and say in 6 to 9 months of following this program of science-backed, evidence-informed techniques that I didn't invent, but that better your brain health, they see a dramatic improvement in their mental well-being.
And I just want to clarify for the audience that when you're talking about an anti-inflammatory diet, the reason why is inflammation doesn't affect just the body, it affects the brain. So when there's what's called neuroinflammation, which is brain inflammation, which is which is really probably one of the core issues to mental illness.
Yes.
That dysfunction is because we have inundated it with things that are inflammatory. And when the brain swells, things shit happens. Sorry.
not just mental health crisis can be caused by the foods we eat, but certainly things like aggression, violence
Yes.
are perpetrated a lot due to the struggle inside our minds because of our gut. Your gut microbiome houses and creates all of
Yes.
your body's and brain serotonin and dopamine, affecting your mental well-being. If you're feeding your gut only processed foods, you're damaging your brain's functionality at the cellular level.
Gonna love you. Oh my God, this is so exciting. Yeah, no, this is what I believe, but it's awesome because you're so effective and you really touch so many lives and people believe you because of the journey that you've been through, right? And you can say, look, I have this, I do this, and this works. And you're so right. I mean, we talk about the microbiome and how that's the second brain, maybe the first. Who knows?
Yeah, really the first. It plays a predominant effect and factor into your mental well-being, and too few people recognize that. The other thing is, when you look at America as a whole, there are far too many food deserts in America where people in those food deserts can't afford the anti-inflammatory meals they need to feed their brain. So they're constantly, regularly feeding their children and loved ones inflammatory meals that are causing terrible atrocities across this country, that people don't even recognize that the moods we have, the aggression levels we experience, all of that is directly tied to the gut. There's not to say that you're not to blame or guilt anyone. I'm saying, we have to understand there's a precipitating reason for these factors, and people are not taking them into account.
No, and here's the thing. I speak like you, not as often, but I do speak around the country. And what I notice is you go into these, the homes and the centers and all that stuff, and they're doing wonderful work. Like my heart goes out to them. But there's always this disconnect when it comes to the food. Because I go and I see them and I see them have meals and they're just piled, talk about inflammatory foods. They have little chance of getting past that, that's why I believe that that's one of the reasons why there's such recidivism, right? They keep going back, they keep because they're not really addressing the core issue.
Right, and the core issues is the right word. It's the core. It's internal and it comes external, and people look at the military, for example. When you go on a military base, and I visit military bases half of every year to talk about suicide prevention, but they're not addressing one of the biggest elephants in the room. You go to a military base, there's a Taco Bell, there's a Starbucks, there's a McDonald's, there's a Burger King, and there's a Subway. Every meal in every one of their restaurants is inflammatory. Yeah. And they have to address that if they're going to change the suicide rate in the military, period.
100%. And isn't it the same in schools?
It's the same in schools. Remember the food revolution that came out for a while, but that disappeared. It was shut down. And it's let's be clear, the FDA has a lot to do with this.
Yep.
When you can keep people in a certain position, where they're not questioning too much, then you can control they're not thinking for themselves. Well, and I'm stammering only because it's a tricky step it's a tricky step here to take. So I'm trying to watch my words lest somebody break into my house here. But if we can keep people ignorant
and controlled,
then we can control them. And when you have too many, and my husband's half Japanese, and in Japan they always say the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. And in the military you can't have nails sticking up.
No,
because there's not enough hammers to keep all those nails sticking up. So it's kind of like, forgive my parallel here, but it's kind of like in prison. The guards have to be in control. And so in prisons, the food is just as hideous with the big blocks of government cheese that they have in the military. Yeah.
Oh, it's horrible. And Bobby is my significant other, and he loves to dive into different food things. And he was saying that the reason that Kellogg's invented cornflakes or something was they were for prisons, and it was to keep them literally anesthetized.
Yep.
So it's like,
Yep.
just keep them
There-
calm.
there's a
Give 'em
great
food
there's a
that doesn't
great-
make them aggressive,
yeah,
kill them with testosterone or whatever.
yeah,
Isn't that interesting that we are so about, we live in the land of the free, and yet we want to control everybody and how they feel
Yeah.
and what they think.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
it's it's one of those daunting things where you go, holy crap, is
Yeah.
that really happening in my country?
It really is, and it's pretty when you look really deep into it, it's pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
There are a lot of communities that don't have like we talked about those food deserts. They don't have the ability to have
Yeah.
another option. They don't have opportunity. They don't get a chance. And
That's right.
let me paint a really clear example. My birth parents. My dad's half Mexican, half Italian. My birth dad. My birth mom was Jamaican, Black, African, Arawak, Indian, Portuguese, Scottish, Irish, English, and Sephardic Jew. What wasn't she? My point is this: they had no income. They had no feasible legal income. They had to hustle to survive. We lived in and out of crack motels, box spring for mattress, concrete slab floor kind of places you paid for by the hour, and if you didn't, you were out. And they fed us what they could steal. Our diets, my brother and I, our diets consisted of Kool-Aid, Coca-Cola, and sour milk. My gut was destroyed. My brain was ravaged from birth. From birth. Now you look at that. That's one family.
Yep.
It happens around the country every single day.
Absolutely.
Every single day. And we wonder why there's such a high propensity in those neighborhoods for violence or
Right.
mental struggle or suicide or homicide. It's all connected.
Yeah.
It's absolutely the truth. And I'm so grateful for you to have this voice to just say, hey, this is a reality. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying, what are we going to do? Right?
Yeah, this is a fact. How do we solve it? And
Yes.
I don't have the answers to how we solve it, but we have to address another elephant in the room is that some of this is being, I hate to use this word, but perpetrated. So some of this is on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To keep a certain
Of course.
keep a
100%.
certain populace to keep a certain populace down.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And
The fact that
that's heartbreaking.
like health and wellness is for only people that with the means, that's just
Means more
wrong.
money.
It's
Means
just
more money. Yeah.
It's all money. Yeah, that's right. Well, we had a guest on one time who was talking to us about the fact that certain fast food restaurants can't have an option when they buy into franchise, right? And so you can either have great profit and be in a low income neighborhood, or have lower profit but be in a more prestigious neighborhood. So the majority of them would opt to have a greater
More money.
Go ahead.
Ah.
I just got excited.
Sorry.
I have a question I want to ask you, and I apologize for jumping off, but I'm intrigued to learn, how do you find the balance, Kevin, for you and your family, between sharing so much in-depth unveiling of your life and your need for privacy? How do you find that balance?
For me, the need for privacy occurs when I'm taking a day off and I need to just be with my wife and hold her tight. And we do that every weekend. So I don't, there are times when I have certain things that I have to attend to on the weekends for work, but I pretty much try to work Monday through Friday and be attached to all the people that need my help, because frankly, we're like our own crisis lifeline. People are reaching out to us on a regular basis. My mom just reached out to me today for a friend of hers that her son is in trouble and needs help. So I'm the guy my family and friends call when someone's in need like this. So it's not just the outside world reaching in, it's all of my family, all of my friends, all my colleagues. And so I set boundaries. I have to, and we set boundaries, and with those boundaries, I find my peace. The other thing I do, which is really beneficial, is I meditate every morning and I meditate every evening without fail, no matter what. And transcendental meditation has helped keep me sane for the last few years since I've learned it. I went to the great Bob Roth, CEO of the David Lynch Foundation, and he taught it to me himself. And that was an incredible gift bestowed upon me by Paul Dalio, which was incredible. He's a good friend, and you know, when I learned that and implemented it into my daily activity, it helped keep all of this other stuff at bay, so I can focus on the, you know, when I need to calm things down.
Absolutely. Well, I always say that meditation actually expands time. You know, like by taking time, you expand time. It's interesting because it
Yeah.
calms the nervous system down. I think it puts you in parasympathetic and enables you to make better choices when you're when you have to be active, which
You know,
clearly.
Mariel, that's really interesting when you said it spans time, because there are cultures in the world that don't and have not for centuries utilized the concept of time. And these cultures that don't utilize the concept of time, it's not even a part of their language. There's no numerical sense for what month, day, or year it is in these cultures.
Wow.
And when they do that, they have no sense of when they're going to die. They have no sense of when they're going, if they're going to get sick, for how long. They have no sense of how old they are, and they live longer. They live healthier lives, and they eat off the land. I find it fascinating that you said that, because I was just been reading about this, and I think that, you know, if we gave up a little bit of the concept of time, somehow we might have more of it. It's just an odd way to think about it.
No, I think it's the key to longevity is not buying into, you know, this this is what happens at this age and
This is
age.
my deadline.
Yeah, I know. And like, I'm going to retire. It's like, what? Wait.
I have a brother who's deaf. I've told this to Mariel before, but I'm the youngest of three, and my middle brother was born deaf. And he never, when, you know, you rub his shoulders, or he's never had a headache in his life. He's 62. He's never had a headache. His shoulders aren't tight and stressed out. And, you know, I say, why don't you have any stress? How come you never have headaches? I don't want you to. And he says, I don't wear a watch. He said, he's convinced it's all hearing people. Hearing people have created time. It's horrible. You know, everyone, he's like, deaf people know time means nothing. And I said, okay. So but there's something to it because Corey's so relaxed.
Think about that. That makes perfect sense.
It does make perfect sense.
Yeah.
That's a hearing people problem. Oh my goodness.
Kevin, you're amazing. You have to come back and speak to us because you're just a wealth of information, and I just want your message to go everywhere. I hope you'll come back. We only do a half-hour interview. I apologize for that.
If you'll have me back, I'll come back in a heartbeat. Absolutely. Okay. I want to meet you in person too.
Me too, you. I can't wait. And there's so much. Yeah, there's a lot. We got a lot. We got a lot. Well, thank you so much. This is amazing. You're amazing. Remember, you can see at Kevin Hines Story.
At Kevin Hines Story across all socials except for YouTube, youtube.com/Kevin Hines. 800 plus videos, all designed to help you change your brain to change your life.
I love it. Do it, people.
Hi, I'm Nikki Mark. 5 years ago, my 12-year-old son unexpectedly passed away. Ever since, I've been on a journey to heal my heart and honor my son by sharing his spirit of play with the world. You can learn more about my story at nikkimark.com or tm23.org. You're listening to Out Comes the Sun with Mariel Hemingway and Melissa Yamaguchi. Thanks for tuning in.
Oh my gosh, everyone, that was so amazing. I love him. I love him. I love what he's doing. My heart goes out to him. And I tip my hat to his wonderful partner, Margaret, I think it is, his wife, because she organizes all of his schedule. And I really appreciate that. Being as now I have this amazing, significant other husband, whatever you want to call him. And I'm starting to realize that when somebody's super busy and you have to help them organize their life, that's a situation. It's a situation.
It takes talent.
You've been doing it for years, right? You have
over 30.
Yeah, you've been doing it for many, many years. And I'm just now kind of doing that with Bobby because he's got a significant business that is happening called Stratosphere, and it's extraordinary. It's so cool. But I've never seen anybody work so hard, so many hours, talk on the phone so much. And I really want to protect his time. It's very interesting when, like it's wonderful to have success, but with that, you need to get organized, right?
Finding the balance.
Organize and balance it out and really make it, and you have to put boundaries up. I mean, it was really like Kevin was talking about. He takes his, his weekends or when he, holds his wife close, and that's all they do. And they make those boundaries. And you really do have to do that.
When I was thinking about Kevin, and I was reading some of the statistics on, thousands of people have jumped in attempts of suicide from the Golden Gate Bridge, and only 36 have survived. So he's one of 36. It's less than 1%. So, and I read that he said when he came up and realized he was still alive, and in all the different circumstances that he talked about on the show, he said, "Oh God, that was a mistake. I actually do want to live." And when I was reading it, I was thinking, holy smokes, man, to be able to
I forgot to ask that. I did want to ask him what were the, what were those thoughts? Like, what was that thought right before? And what was that thought when you realize you're still alive? Not to mention I'm thinking, I'm terrified. I'm in the water, like, oh my God, like that's a whole situation. Like, wow.
Yeah.
And then a sea lion that he held on to. Now, we didn't even get into that story.
I wonder what the sea lion told his wife when he went home that night. You're not going to believe what happened to me on the way to work.
There was this guy.
He held on for dear life.
He kept holding on.
I did the best I could, Mabel. I did the best I could.
I got him.
Amazing.
Off I went.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
It is amazing. It's amazing. Human nature is amazing, and our desire to actually live. It's very interesting because, I think at the end of the day, if you have the opportunity to make that mistake, but then have it come out okay, like it did for him, it's like, wow, and it just shows you that energy shifts, right? So what you think is so problematic in that moment, and then you have that fall and whatever, and whatever the physical that happened, but that crash into the water awakened him to like, what the heck? I don't want to die. It's very interesting.
And the opportunity he has taken the opportunity, rehabilitated his entire way of thinking. He rehabilitated his body. He did a whole physical transformation, rehabilitated his way of thinking, and then said, all right, I'm here for a reason. Now I'm going to start. I mean, his dad, the push from his dad. I mean, it's fascinating. I'm horrified and so sad that he went through it, but I'm incredibly proud that he's not wasting this chance and this opportunity. And he's pushing hard.
And man, he started right away. And did you hear, and I know you did because you hear things the way that I do, is that so when he was first in that psych ward, that was number one when he met what's his name, and then he's had 2 other times that he was involuntarily put in there. So that was an interest, and I thought that's part of the story that's very interesting because there is, the journey of recovery for mental health issues is not easy. It's like an addiction. It's like anything. It's like you slip off as you're trying to find your way.
That's right.
People need to realize it's not perfect. It's not a perfect path. It's just a path,
And you think there's one thing to deal with the social stigma. There's another thing to deal with your own mental stigma of, oh my gosh, this is where I've been, and feeling that you're not worthy on some level and trying to get beyond that. And speaking about it with like, this is what happened. And here I am. They identify me, but here I am. It explains some of my path, but here I am now. I'm so impressed with it. I'm impressed with his ability to say, yes, involuntarily, voluntarily, I did this, this has happened, here I am. Whereas a lot of people may mumble those words
Yeah. Yeah.
because they may be ashamed or embarrassed. And he's like, well, it happened and here I am. I think he's
Yeah. No,
highly credible. He's an amazing
it's-
guy.
oh, and I love that he has the 3 E's: education, exercise, and eating right. I love him for that. Hey, everyone, thank you for listening today. What an incredible show. We're so grateful to have you here on Out Comes the Sun. Please come back and remember that we're always kind of doing this with in the back of our minds. We want to help Mariel Hemingway Foundation.org, which is a foundation for mental health. We just want to be a resource navigator. We don't want to be a doctor or anything. We want to guide you towards the best person for your recovery. So just remember that. And if you go to the site and you're like, wait, where is stuff? We're raising money so that we can become that for you wherever you are in this country. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week. Another show.